We are now at exercise 4, and this video is gonna cover yet another Excel tool. But before we talk about this, I wanna make sure you're not forgetting about the big picture. You are playing the role as a revenue analyst, and you have been hired to help this hotel make the decisions to turn this business around and beat our competitors. Everything that we are covering in this module is working towards this bigger purpose. In exercise 1, you started this process by organizing data so that we can understand it. In exercise 2, you then discovered that you can make this whole process even more efficient by automating it with Excel. And finally, in exercise 3, you learned how to take this organized data, contextualize it, and then create some meaning out of it. These exercises are helping you build a set of skills. And this is going to set us up for the future modules where we can then arrive at the actual decisions to get this hotel back on track. Now in this video, we're going to learn about the pivot table. And I would say this is the most relevant tool because it's the one that most companies use. The pivot table, what it does is it organizes our data into a summarized table based on the customizations and specifications we give it. And the powerful thing about the pivot table is that everything we did in exercise 1, exercise 2, the pivot table can do too. It's able to filter, it's able to have that sum-ifs mechanism from the sum-ifs formula. All of those features, the pivot table has it too. And I'm gonna show you how it works. The best way to approach this is you want to already be thinking about how we want the pivot table to look. For example, in our zoo, the objective is to use the pivot table to transform the zoo data we see here into a table that organizes the number of animals by color. And notice how in this table, the number of orange animals has already been added together. This is something that you did previously with the sum-ifs. Now, before we do anything, we need to already have an idea of how we want the pivot table to look like. So on the left side of the table, we have the different colors, and on the right side, we have the number of animals for each color. Now I'm gonna show you how to set this up. So let's select our data, make sure that you're including column labels, and then go to Insert, and then go to Pivot Table. So notice how this is already pre-populated because you selected the data. Let's go to existing worksheets. You can select any cell in the tab and then hit OK. The basic idea with this pivot table is that you're gonna want to drag these field names to one or more of these white boxes. So let's give it a shot. As you drag it to each of these boxes, our little table here starts to change, right? And that's the basic idea with this table. It's very dynamic. Now, if I were to have you remember one thing about this, notice how there's a left side and there's a right side. Everything that we want the left side to be should be in the rows section, and everything we want the right side to be should be the value section. So beginning with the end in mind, already envisioning how we want the table to look like, what should be in the rows section?
The color.
The colors, exactly. And what should be in the value section?
A number of animals.
The number of animals, exactly. Now, what do you think the filters does?
We have different colors and we only want to see one color, then we can filter for a single color.
Right, and the same goes for animals. When we filter to cats, only the orange information comes out because it doesn't care about any of the other colors. It's only cats. Same for dog, same for elephant, etc. And what about the columns?
It expands on maybe like for each animal.
If I drag these animals to the columns, notice how the different animal categories are now set as columns in the pivot table, and the values for these animals have been automatically populated for each color that you see in the row section. And that's really powerful. So we want to create a table that reports daily revenue for the month of July. Now again, before we do anything, we need to already have an idea of what the table should look like. And if you really think about it, the table should basically be formatted the same as exercises 1 and 2, right? We would have the dates for July on the left side, and the revenue earned for each date would be on the right side. So given this, let's first select our data. We'll go to accounting data, highlight all of the cells. We can do this by selecting the column and then dragging it to the right. After the data is selected, we are going to go to Insert, Pivot Table, and this time we are going to create a new worksheet. So to account for the left side of the table, we're going to want to drag the post date to the row section, and to account for the right side of the table, we can then drag the amounts to the value section. Now, do these numbers look like the right numbers? Does it make sense that I made $148 on January 1st?
No.
What do you think the count means?
How many transactions there were.
Right. Excel counts the number of rows based on this customization you gave it. But is this what we want?
No.
What do we want instead?
We want the actual revenue.
We want the actual revenue. By the way, whenever you come across the screen and the builder kind of disappears, you can click Pivot Table Analyze and Field List. Click this icon here, okay? And then instead of counts, what do we want?
We want the sum.
We want the sum. And now we have the sum of, oh wait, how come we're seeing negative numbers here?
Because we haven't filtered for just revenue.
Even though we now are summing the numbers, and that's correct, these values are still not accurate because they don't represent the actual revenue. The numbers that you see here are also adding up other irrelevant transactions, and we do not care about those. So for this pivot table, what do we need to filter to?
We need to filter to room chart.
Right.
So description.
Oh, not the I. Focus on only the room charge. Now, because we are only looking for revenue earned for July, we also need to add a second filter, which is the month. And this is going to allow you to focus on only the items relevant to the month of July. And now we have a beautifully mapped out table that assigns revenue earned to each of these given dates. Now I do want to add one last thing. When we think about the functionality of this pivot table, it pretty much has done the same thing as the SUMIFs, right? It's processed all of these dates, it's processed these categories in the filters, and it automatically sums for us all of the amounts based on your specifications. And it took us what? 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
2 minutes.